Public-private partnerships. How can PPPs deliver better services? PPP frameworks and institutions. How can they support infrastructure development?
Colombia has been doing concessions or PPPs in the transportation sector for more than 20 years now. We started doing these concessions back in the early 90s when the country decided to open up the economy. And we started doing it on the sea terminals because it was very important to have a competitive infrastructure to be able to export and to be able to import under an economic opening policy. We then started doing it in roads, in railways, and eventually in airports. This framework was fine-tuned or improved through a new law back in 2012 called the PPP law. Under this law, any entity in the Colombian government, be it national or be it regional, is able to do PPPs. But these PPPs need to be approved by the Finance Ministry and they need to be approved by the Planning Department. By the Finance Ministry to make sure that the numbers are coherent with the budgets, of course, but also that the risks that are being assumed by the national government are appropriately covered and reasonable. The National Planning Department looks at the coherence of the investments with the overall needs of the country. It looks at the cost-benefit analysis of the project, and it compares the project as a PPP versus doing the project through regular contracting, because we want to make sure that we do through PPPs the project that really require being done through PPPs. So it's a process that is a little bit long and complex, but through this mechanism, we make sure that the projects that are eventually approved are coherent with the investment plans of the Colombian government, but are also coherent with the fiscal possibilities of the country. Through 20 years of experience doing concessions or PPPs here in Colombia, we learned many lessons through the successes and obviously the failures. And we've been fixing the model through the PPP law that I just mentioned, but also by taking, let's say, organizational decisions and policy decisions in entities like CANI. Let me talk about some of the problems that we had and how we're addressing them both through the law and also through policies and organizational decisions. The first problem was delays. Our projects that were supposed to last 3-4 years lasted 6-8 years. It was typical for a project to last twice as long as it was originally planned. And there were many reasons for that. But then we decided to work on the framework to fix that problem. The first one is to fix the incentives, to make sure that payments are only made once infrastructure is given to the government. Unfortunately, in the past, we allowed for some payments to be made during the construction process before delivery of the actual infrastructure. So in some cases, it was actually profitable for the developer to delay the works. Now, we make payments when significant pieces of the infrastructure are delivered and are functional. That generates a big incentive to construct quickly in order to get payment. Of course, it's not all an issue of incentives. We also had problems and delays on land acquisition, and we had problems and delays on environmental licenses, and we also had problems on social consultations. So what we did to fix that is, one, improve the regulations so that land acquisition and expropriation could be done very quickly. Now it shouldn't take more than 90 days to expropriate a piece of land under the new regulation. We improved the regulation in the environmental arena to make sure that the licensing process is predictable. We didn't try so much to reduce the regular times. It still takes 6 to 9 months to get an environmental license. but we avoided the possibility of generating delays. And we also have been working on improving the social consultation process. So through these mechanisms, we expect that a lot of the delays will be avoided from here on, and that the incentives are properly aligned. The other thing that we learned is that it's very important to give the private sector the opportunity to bring projects to the government that do not require government resources. It's what we call here private initiatives. Private initiatives have always been allowed in Colombia, but they were never presented. For the 20 years of the old concession law, we didn't get a single private initiative approved. Since we created the new PPP law, at least in ANI, we've already approved or are in the process of approval of close to 20 private initiative PPPs. What we learned there is that we needed to give a bigger incentive to the private sector to bring the projects to us. And the incentive that we decided to provide is that whomever brings the proposal to us and it's approved, it is presented to the market so that other developers can bring us better offers. But the original developer has the opportunity of matching the best offer and still retain the project. So improving the incentives for private initiatives has been very important, and a big part of the investments that we're going to do over the next 5 years are going to be done through projects originated in the private sector. The other thing that we have learned is that we need to have quick conflict resolution mechanisms. So our current contracts all call for arbitration that is much faster than using the regular legal system in the country. And for some decisions that are very time sensitive, we're using the equivalent of dispute boards that in most cases are mandatory and that allow for conflict resolution to be quick. So in general, I would say that what we have learned over the past is that we need to align the incentives so that builders do things more quickly, do them better, that we need to fix the legal framework so that all the delays related to land acquisition, to social consultations, to environmental licenses are minimized, and that we gotta generate incentives for the private sector to bring us ideas and mechanisms to be able to solve conflicts in a fair manner, but quickly.
This has been an Open Learning Campus presentation brought to you by the World Bank Group, accelerating solutions through learning.